The observation deck of the Galactic Academy's Xenobiology research station hummed with nervous energy as students from 17 different species clustered around Professor's holographic display. The four eyes gleamed with excitement as she manipulated the three-dimensional image of a creature that made half the class instinctively step backward. "Behold," Professor announced, her voice carrying the weight of scientific reverence, "the apex predator of 442b, discovered just last month by our Deep Space Survey team." The hologram rotated slowly, revealing a creature that seemed designed by nightmares. Standing nearly 4 meters tall at the shoulder, its obsidian-black carapace reflected the laboratory lights like polished metal. 6 powerful legs ended in razor-sharp talons that could punch through titanium plating. Its elongated skull housed rows of crystalline teeth, each one capable of delivering a bite force that could crush starship hull plating. Most terrifying of all were its eyes, multifaceted orbs that could track prey across multiple spectrums of light simultaneously. "The umbral stalker," Professor continued, "represents the pinnacle of evolutionary perfection. Notice the adaptive camouflage capability." The hologram shifted, its black surface rippling and changing to match its surroundings. It can become virtually invisible to most forms of detection. The thermal regulators along its spine allow it to mask its heat signature. The electromagnetic dampeners in its carapace render it nearly undetectable to standard sensors. A student, his chitinous mandibles clicking nervously, raised one of his 4 arms. "Professor, what is its prey drive classification?" "Hyperpredator," came the reply, causing several students to exchange worried glances. "It hunts not just for sustenance, but for sport. Our teams found evidence that this species drove at least 12 other sentient species to extinction on their home world. They appear to hunt in coordinated packs, using sophisticated ambush tactics that suggest problem-solving intelligence." A cadet near the back of the group, her crystalline skin pulsing with anxiety colors, spoke up with a trembling voice. "How fast can it move?" Professor smiled grimly. "In laboratory simulations, we clocked short-distance sprints at over 120 kilometers per hour. But that's not the truly frightening part." She enhanced a portion of the hologram, highlighting the creature's limbs. "Notice the hydraulic muscle structure. It can leap vertically up to 50 meters and horizontally over 200 meters in a single bound." The class fell into stunned silence. Even the usually boisterous delegates seemed subdued by the implications. "The exoskeleton," the professor continued, "can withstand direct plasma rifle fire. Our preliminary weapons tests suggest it would take concentrated heavy artillery to penetrate its natural armor. The neurotoxic spines along its back can be fired with pinpoint accuracy up to 300 meters. A single spine contains enough toxin to kill a fully grown battlecruiser class." At this, a student in the middle of the group made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a growl, his massive frame actually trembling despite weighing nearly half a ton. Professor gestured to another section of the hologram. "Perhaps most remarkably, the umbral stalker exhibits tool use. We've observed specimens fashioning crude weapons from environmental materials and using them with frightening efficiency. Intelligence estimates place their cognitive capacity somewhere between that of a primitive sentient and an advanced predator." "Professor," interrupted a thin, reedy voice from the corner, "what about pack coordination?" "Excellent question." The hologram split to show multiple creatures moving in formation. "They hunt in groups of 3 to 7 individuals, using complex tactical maneuvers that would make military strategists proud. They can communicate through subsonic frequencies across vast distances, coordinate simultaneous attacks from multiple vectors, and even adapt their hunting strategies based on prey behavior." A student, her tentacles writhing with distress, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "Has the Galactic Council classified this species as a sector-wide threat?" Professor nodded gravely. "As of yesterday, 442b has been declared a no-fly zone. Any unauthorized vessel detected within a 50-light-year radius will be intercepted by Galactic Defense Forces. The umbral stalkers represent a clear and present danger to all known forms of life." The hologram zoomed in on the creature's head, showing the intricate network of sensory organs clustered around its skull. "They can detect heartbeats from over a kilometer away, track pheromone trails that are days old, and their visual acuity is so precise they can spot movement at ranges that exceed most ship-based sensors." "What about their reproduction rate?" asked a concerned delegate, her bioluminescent patches flickering rapidly. Horrifyingly efficient, Professor replied. Each female can produce up to 20 offspring annually, and the young reach hunting maturity within 2 standard years. If they ever managed to establish a foothold on an inhabited world, the ecosystem would collapse within a decade. As the class absorbed this information, the professor enhanced the audio sensors in the hologram. The sound that emerged made several students physically recoil, a bone-chilling combination of metallic scraping and subsonic vibrations that seemed to bypass conscious hearing and trigger primal fear responses directly in the brain. That, Professor explained, is how an umbral stalker announces the beginning of a hunt. The acoustic signature is specifically tuned to induce paralytic fear in most carbon-based life forms. Prey species literally become unable to move when they hear it. A small commotion near the back of the class caught everyone's attention. While the other students huddled together in instinctive fear responses, one figure remained completely unmoved by the terrifying display. A human cadet, barely 18 standard years old, stood with his arms crossed, wearing an expression of mild curiosity rather than the terror exhibited by his classmates. "Cadet," Professor called, noticing his unusual reaction. "Do you have a question about the material?" The young human stepped forward, his movement casual and confident in stark contrast to the nervous energy radiating from the other students. Several aliens actually moved away from him, as if his proximity might somehow attract the attention of the creature in the hologram. "Not really a question, Professor," Tommy replied, his voice carrying a note of amusement that made several students exchange bewildered glances. "It's just that you keep calling this thing an apex predator, and honestly, it just reminds me of my neighbor's dog back home." The classroom fell into the kind of silence typically reserved for moments just before catastrophic explosions. Professor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion among her species. "I'm sorry, Cadet, but did you just compare an apex predator to a domestic animal?" Tommy shrugged, his expression remaining remarkably calm. "Well, yeah, I mean it's bigger than a German shepherd, obviously, and it has more legs, but the basic structure is pretty similar. The pack hunting, the territorial behavior, the tool use, we've seen all that before." A student's mandibles clicked so rapidly it sounded like castanets. "Cadet, this creature could kill you in 17 different ways before you could even register its presence." Tommy turned to look at the alien student, his face brightening with the kind of expression typically associated with sharing interesting trivia. "Oh, that's nothing. Back on Earth, we have this thing called a grizzly bear. Adult males can weigh up to 800 kilograms, run at 60 kilometers per hour, and their bite force can crush a bowling ball. Their claws are 20 centimeters long and can slice through steel plating." The class stared at him in mounting horror. "And that's not even getting into the really dangerous stuff," Tommy continued cheerfully. "Australian box jellies can kill you with a touch. Poison dart frogs carry enough toxin to drop a dozen adults. Great white sharks can bite through reinforced submarine hulls. Oh, and then there are the microscopic things, bacteria and viruses that make these umbral stalkers look like puppies." Professor's skin had shifted to a pale shade of yellow, the equivalent of shock. "Cadet, are you suggesting that your home world is inhabited by creatures more dangerous than what we've just examined?" Tommy scratched his head, considering the question seriously. "Well, I wouldn't say more dangerous exactly, different kinds of dangerous. But here's the thing, Professor, we don't just live alongside these predators, we've domesticated most of them." The silence that followed this statement was so complete that the ambient hum of the space station's life support systems seemed deafeningly loud. The word domesticated hung in the air like a toxic gas cloud, causing several students to activate their personal breathing apparatus, as if the very concept might be harmful to inhale. Professor's 4 eyes were now blinking in a pattern that her species typically reserved for moments of complete cognitive breakdown. "Domesticated," she repeated slowly, as if testing whether the word might make more sense if spoken with different emphasis. "You're telling this class that humans have somehow tamed creatures comparable to apex predators." Tommy's face lit up with the enthusiasm of someone about to share his favorite hobby. "Oh, way better than tamed, Professor. We've bred them to be partners, companions, workers, even family members. Take wolves, for instance, massive pack hunters with bite forces strong enough to crush bones. Humans turned them into dogs, Now they live in our homes, play with our children, and some of them are so friendly they'd probably try to help a burglar carry out the television. A student's crystalline skin shifted through several colors of distress. You allow apex predators to interact with your offspring. Not just allow, Tommy replied with a grin that made several aliens take another step backward. We encourage it. Dogs and kids are best friends. Back home, it's actually considered weird if a family doesn't have some kind of domesticated predator living with them. Professor activated her personal data pad with trembling appendages. Cadet, I'm accessing the human cultural database right now, and I'm seeing references to something called cats. The description suggests they are small-scale predators with retractable claws, night vision, and reflexes fast enough to catch prey in mid-flight. House cats, Tommy nodded. Yeah, they're probably the most successful predators on Earth, honestly. Perfect killing machines scaled down to cute size. They can see in almost complete darkness. Their reaction time is about 6 times faster than humans, and they're basically liquid when it comes to getting into places they shouldn't be. The student's tentacles had now twisted themselves into what appeared to be a protective knot. And humans live with these creatures voluntarily. Live with them? We worship them, Tommy laughed. The ancient Egyptians literally considered cats to be gods, and honestly, most cat owners today would probably agree. There are entire sections of our global information network dedicated to pictures and videos of cats. We spend billions of credits annually on food, toys, and medical care for them. A delegate, his usually aggressive posture now distinctly defensive, spoke up. What about larger predators? Surely humans maintain safe distances from truly dangerous creatures. Tommy's expression became thoughtful. Well, that depends on how you define safe distance. We've got people who work directly with animals that could kill them without breaking a sweat. Zookeepers, wildlife researchers, marine biologists who swim with sharks, people who ride horses. Wait, interrupted a student, her bioluminescent patches now strobing in alarm patterns. Humans mount large quadrupeds and allow them to carry you at high speeds. Horses, yeah, they're prey animals, technically, but they weigh about 500 kilograms and can kick hard enough to shatter concrete. We've been riding them for thousands of years. Some humans jump over barriers while riding them just for sport. Professor was now making rapid notes on her data pad, her movements becoming increasingly frantic. I'm seeing references to something called extreme sports. The database suggests that humans voluntarily engage in activities with high probability of injury or death for recreational purposes. Tommy's eyes lit up even brighter. Oh, extreme sports are awesome. Base jumping, free climbing, deep-sea diving, volcano boarding, cage fighting. Cage fighting? A student's voice cracked, which was particularly impressive given that vocal cords were made of cartilage that could withstand atmospheric pressure changes. Mixed martial arts, Tommy explained casually. Humans get in an enclosed area and fight each other until one of them can't continue. It's incredibly popular. We sell tickets for people to watch other humans engage in controlled violence. The classroom had now divided into 2 distinct groups. Those students pressed against the far wall and those who had apparently decided that the emergency exit was a better option. Professor remained at her station, but her skin had now shifted to a deep purple that indicated severe psychological distress among. Cadet, she said slowly, I need to understand something. You're describing a species that voluntarily with predators engages in recreational violence and pursues dangerous activities for entertainment. How has your species achieved without going extinct? Tommy considered this question seriously, his casual demeanor suggesting he'd never really thought about it before. I guess we're really good at risk management. Like, we figured out early on that the best way to deal with something dangerous isn't to run away from it, but to understand it, work with it, maybe make it useful. He gestured toward the hologram of the umbral stalker, which had been quietly rotating throughout the conversation. Take this guy, for example. Everyone's focused on how scary it is, but I'm seeing a bunch of really useful traits. The camouflage ability would be incredible for reconnaissance missions. That jumping capability could be amazing for low-gravity construction work. The pack coordination suggests they're intelligent enough to train. A collective gasp arose from the remaining students. The who had been clicking nervously throughout the class now sounded like a machine gun. You want to train them? Professor's voice had risen an octave. Well, not me personally, Tommy replied. I'm studying engineering, not xenobiology. But yeah, I bet there are humans back home who would love to work with these guys. We've got people who train animals way more dangerous than this. More dangerous than an apex predator? The question came from several students simultaneously. Tommy's expression grew serious for the first time since the conversation began. Professor, you keep using the term apex predator like it's the scariest thing in the universe. But on Earth, the apex predator isn't some giant monster with claws and teeth. The classroom fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different, expectant, almost ominous. What is Earth's apex predator? Professor asked, though her voice suggested she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to know the answer. Tommy smiled, and for the first time, there was something in that expression that reminded everyone present exactly which species had conquered their home world, developed faster-than-light travel, and was now calmly discussing the domestication of creatures that had been classified as sector-wide threats. Humans, he said simply, we're the apex predator. Everything else on Earth is just neighbors. The hologram of the umbral stalker continued to rotate slowly as the class absorbed this information. Suddenly, its fearsome claws and thermal camouflage seemed less impressive. When viewed through the lens of a species that had spent turning wolves into lap dogs and riding prey animals for fun, the creature began to look less like a nightmare and more like a project. You see, Tommy continued, his voice taking on the tone of someone explaining something obvious. The thing about being an apex predator isn't about being the biggest or the strongest or having the sharpest teeth. It's about being smart enough to make everything else work for you instead of against you. Professor's data pad chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at it, and her already purple skin somehow managed to become even deeper in color. Cadet, she said weakly, I've just received a priority communication from the Galactic Defense Council. It appears that 3 unauthorized human vessels were detected in the 442B system approximately 6 hours ago. The emergency alert klaxon began wailing throughout the research station, its piercing sound designed to cut through the audio processing systems of 17 different species. Red warning lights bathed the observation deck in an ominous glow as Professor's communication panel lit up with incoming priority transmissions. This is impossible, she muttered, her 4 eyes darting between multiple data streams. The Galactic Defense Force established a complete quarantine around that system. Nothing should be able to penetrate the blockade. Tommy leaned against the nearest workstation with the casual posture of someone watching an interesting but not particularly concerning news broadcast. Oh, those are probably just researchers, he said, checking what appeared to be a personal communication device. Yeah, here we go, Dr. Sarah's Xenobiology team, Captain Survey Crew, and... He paused, squinting at the screen. Looks like the Miller family brought their kids along for the field trip. The remaining students in the classroom had now formed what could only be described as a huddle of terror in the far corner. Professor's datapad was receiving so many emergency transmissions that it had begun making a sound like an angry during mating season. Cadet, Professor said, her voice carrying the strained quality of someone trying very hard not to have a complete mental breakdown. Are you telling me that humans are currently conducting unauthorized research in a system containing the most dangerous apex predator ever discovered? Tommy glanced up from his device with mild confusion. Unauthorized? I mean, I guess they didn't file the paperwork with the Galactic Council, but that's probably because Earth's Department of Xenobiology doesn't recognize Galactic Council jurisdiction over first contact protocols. We've got our own procedures for this kind of thing. Your own procedures? Professor repeated numbly. Standard protocol for potentially dangerous, Tommy explained, as if reciting from a textbook. Establish observation posts, conduct behavioral studies, assess intelligence levels, determine domestication potential, and evaluate integration possibilities. Pretty routine stuff. The holographic display suddenly shifted to show real-time sensor data from the 442B system. 3 human vessels were indeed present, their positions indicating they had somehow bypassed the Galactic Defense Force blockade entirely. More concerning was what the sensors were detecting on the planet's surface. By the eternal void, whispered a student, her crystalline skin now completely transparent with shock. They're not maintaining safe orbital distance. They've landed. The sensor data showed 3 distinct landing sites on the planet's surface, each one in an area that had previously been identified as primary umbral stalker territory. As the class watched in horrified fascination, the display updated to show movement patterns around the human landing zones. "Professor," called out the student, her bioluminescent patches now flickering in what appeared to be a distress signal. "The umbral stalkers are converging on the human positions. This is going to be a massacre." Tommy looked up from his communication device again, frowning slightly. "Massacre? No, that doesn't sound right." He tapped something on his screen. "According to the field reports, first contact went really well. Doctor's team made contact with a pack alpha about 4 hours ago. They're calling them Shadow Hounds now. Apparently, the umbral stalker designation was considered too intimidating for field work." Professor's skin had now progressed beyond purple into a color that didn't exist in most species' visual spectrum. "First contact went well." "Yeah, check this out." Tommy activated his device's holographic display function, projecting a real-time video feed into the classroom. The image that appeared made every non-human in the room question their understanding of reality. The video showed a human woman in standard field research gear sitting, cross-legged on the ground. Beside her, lying in what could only be described as a relaxed position, was an umbral stalker. The creature's fearsome head was resting in the woman's lap while she gently scratched behind what appeared to be sensory organs clustered near its skull. "That's Doctor," Tommy said proudly. "She's got a D in psychology from Earth University. She's worked with Siberian tigers, bears, and deep-sea predators. The Shadow Hounds were actually pretty easy once she figured out their pack dynamics." The video feed showed more humans working nearby, with several umbral stalkers moving among them in what appeared to be a completely relaxed manner. One creature was allowing a human child to ride on its back, while others appeared to be engaged in some kind of training exercise with adult researchers. "This is impossible," Professor said, though her voice lacked conviction. "These creatures are apex predators. They cannot be domesticated." "Well, not domesticated exactly," Tommy corrected. "That takes generations of selective breeding. This is more like partnership development. Doctor's preliminary report says the Shadow Hounds have been isolated on that planet for so long that they're actually eager for social contact with new species. Turns out they're incredibly intelligent, probably smarter than dolphins." A new voice joined the conversation as the classroom door slid open. Admiral of the Galactic Defense Force strode into the room, his imposing frame radiating the kind of authority that made students instinctively stand at attention. Behind him followed a retinue of military personnel from various species, all wearing expressions of barely controlled panic. "Professor," the Admiral said without preamble, "we have a situation. 3 human vessels have somehow penetrated our containment zone and are currently on the surface of 442b. We've lost contact with 2 of our observation satellites, and the remaining sensor data is showing impossible readings." Tommy looked up from his communication device with interest. "Oh, hey, Admiral. Yeah, that was probably Doctor's team. They needed to disable your surveillance satellites to avoid interference with their behavioral studies. Standard first contact protocol. You don't want to spook a new species with a bunch of unknown technology watching them." Admiral turned to stare at the human cadet, his mandibles spreading in what among indicated extreme confusion mixed with rising anger. "You're saying that humans deliberately sabotaged Galactic Defense Force equipment?" "Sabotaged is a strong word," Tommy replied diplomatically. "More like temporarily neutralized. Doctor is an expert in integration. I'm sure he can get your satellites back online once the initial contact phase is complete." "Initial contact phase?" Admiral repeated slowly. "Yeah, first contact protocols typically take 72 to 96 hours, depending on the species' social complexity," Tommy explained cheerfully. "Shadow Hounds are showing really sophisticated pack dynamics, so Doctor's team is taking their time to establish proper communication channels before moving to Phase 2. Professor found her voice again. "What exactly is Phase 2? Tommy's expression brightened even further. "Integration assessment. Once they've established that the species is intelligent, non-hostile, and capable of partnership, they'll start evaluating potential applications. The Shadow Hound's sensory capabilities could be amazing for search and rescue operations. Their camouflage abilities would be invaluable for security work, and their pack coordination suggests they'd be excellent partners for exploration missions." "You want to recruit them," Admiral said. his voice carrying the tone of someone trying to process information that simply would not fit into any existing mental framework. "Well, recruit is kind of a limited way to think about it," Tommy replied. "Humans don't really recruit other species so much as invite them to join the community. Like, back home we've got partnerships with dolphins for ocean research, agreements with various bird species for aerial reconnaissance, working relationships with bees for agricultural optimization. It's more like a cooperative than a recruitment program." The holographic display updated again, now showing aerial footage of the human landing sites. What the sensors revealed made the assembled military personnel exchange glances of increasing bewilderment. The humans had established what appeared to be a small settlement, complete with temporary structures and research facilities. More impossibly, dozens of umbral stalkers, shadow hounds, were moving freely throughout the human areas, apparently engaged in various activities alongside the researchers. "How many of these creatures are they working with?" Admiral asked weakly. Tommy checked his device again. "Looks like 3 packs so far, about 42 individuals total. Doctor thinks there might be more packs interested in making contact, but she wants to establish solid relationships with the first groups before expanding the program." "Program?" Professor echoed. "The Shadow Hound Integration Initiative," Tommy read from his screen. "Pending approval from Earth's Ethics Committee, of course. We don't just partner with new species without proper oversight." A new alarm began sounding throughout the station, this one indicating incoming vessels. Admiral activated his personal command interface, and his expression shifted from confusion to something approaching existential dread. "Cadet," he said slowly, "please tell me that those 15 human ships currently approaching this system are not also part of your species' first contact protocols." Tommy glanced at his device and winced slightly. "Okay, so that's probably the media response team, the diplomatic corps, the xenobiology graduate students, a couple of corporate research divisions, and—" He paused, looking embarrassed. "Probably some tourists. Word gets around pretty fast when humans discover a new intelligent species." "Tourists," Admiral repeated, his voice now completely flat. "Yeah, is really popular back home. People love meeting new species, learning about different cultures, taking photos with exotic wildlife. I bet half those ships are families wanting to come see the shadow hounds." The classroom had now fallen into the kind of silence typically associated with religious experiences or severe psychological trauma. Professor stared at the holographic display showing peaceful cooperation between humans and creatures that had been classified as existential threats to galactic civilization. "Cadet," she said finally, "I need to ask you a very important question." Tommy looked up attentively. "In your professional opinion, as a member of a species that apparently domesticates apex predators for recreational purposes, what exactly should the rest of the galaxy expect from humanity's continued expansion into space?" Tommy considered this question with the seriousness it deserved, his expression thoughtful as he looked around the classroom at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. "Well," he said eventually, "I guess you should probably expect to make a lot of new friends." As if to emphasize his point, the holographic display updated one final time, showing Doctor's latest field report. The image showed a human child playing fetch with a juvenile umbral stalker while its parents watched approvingly. Both the human parents and the massive apex predator shadow hound parents. Admiral sat down heavily in the nearest chair, his massive frame suddenly looking very small. "I need to contact the Galactic Council," he said quietly. "I have a feeling we're going to need to revise our threat assessment protocols." Tommy smiled brightly. "Oh, you should definitely talk to Doctor's team before you write any reports. They've got some really exciting ideas about shadow hound integration into galactic society. Apparently, these guys would be amazing partners for deep space exploration missions." As alarms continued to sound throughout the station and emergency messages poured in from across the sector, Tommy returned to his communication device to check for updates from the field team. After all, humanity had just made first contact with a new intelligent species, and there was so much work to be done. The age of human expansion into the galaxy had begun not with conquest or colonization, but with an 18-year-old cadet casually explaining to a classroom of terrified aliens that the most dangerous apex predator in known space was actually pretty cute, and that his people had been domesticating scarier things for thousands of years. In the holographic display, a shadow hound and a human researcher worked side by side, beginning a partnership that would reshape galactic civilization in ways that no one could yet imagine.